You all are so blessed to have this great man, our former governor, Scott Walker, and a fabulous former Lieutenant Governor, Rebecca Clayfish. So it's great to be here with you.
Great to be with you, too. I saw Becky. She was coming out as I was coming in, so
That's right.
we tagged off. She had her State of Wisconsin mask. I have a Wisconsin Badgers mask, hoping someday they'll play football again. At least the Packers are playing football, so that's all right.
Yes, let's talk about college football. What are your thoughts about that?
They should be playing. I mean, it's just that simple. Players for years have had the mask. You see a lot of the players that have the shield on anyway. There's plenty of ways you can adapt. Just like we've adapted for the last few months. One of my neighbors early on is a manufacturer. He was deemed essential way back when this all first started. And he came to me and said, hey, you got any ideas? And we walked through a whole plan. We set it up so that people weren't all coming in and out at the same time. We shut down the break room and things like that. People in the private sector can think much better than the government can in cases like this. And it's time to put our faith back in the people and not the government. And
you know who else is essential? Our teachers.
Absolutely. Well, and it's one of those where, I was thinking about this. Coming in, I saw a couple signs thanking the folks who've been involved in healthcare. Imagine if we had union bosses on behalf of the nurses or doctors, other healthcare professionals who said, we're not going to come to work. Imagine how horrible things would be. And yet I think most teachers want to get back in the classroom with their kids because I think whether they're at a public school, a private school, a charter school, most teachers just love their kids and want to be involved in educating them and understand it's important to do that in person, particularly for our younger kids.
Yeah, and as a parent of 5 girls, we've seen the mental health impact it's had on these kids. They really need to be with their friends, and also they're going to fall behind. So I was talking to Becky where I think her kids are going to go back to school, but then here in Green Bay, they're not going back. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, to me, the easiest answer with all this at the local, state, and even at the federal level is it's time to just give every parent a stipend and say, you get to choose. Whether you want your kid to go to a public school that's in person, your choice. If you want to go to a public school that's online, your choice. You want to go to a charter or a private or whatever the school might be, I think parents now more than ever, even far beyond just the traditional school choice debate, understand that they want to be the ones making that decision. And for some parents, if your kid's got a serious ailment, you might want to keep them at home and do it online. But I think for a lot of parents, they want them in person. Plus, I worry not only about being behind in education, I worry, as I did earlier in the shutdown, sadly, that the number one place that we find about child abuse is typically at school.
That's right.
Because teachers are sometimes the best equipped to see and understand things like that. And if our kids across America aren't going to school, not only losing out in their education, many of them sadly might be in very difficult situations. And I pray there's better ways that we can get them to a place where they can get the help and support they need.
But Governor, I've got some bad news for you. Joe Biden does not agree with you. Can you believe that? He agrees with the teachers' unions. Yeah. He does not believe in charter schools. He's making these parents, especially these single parents, have to choose between their jobs and their child. It is absolutely disgraceful. But let me ask you a question here. We know these Democrat governors, these Democrat mayors, they're really imposing this government expansion and control in our lives. Doesn't this get close to socialism?
Oh, I think in many ways it's past close. It's right there. And I thought, early on, one of the most interesting things, particularly because I love talking to young people about this, about the difference not just in politics, but the difference between socialism and freedom. Because it's far greater than just economic policy. It is about freedom versus socialism. And I used the example, some of you might have saw it in California, where one of the local officials there was upset that some kids were outdoors, out in the open, in a skateboard park, so they plowed sand into the area where they did skateboarding, and these kids on their own ended up brushing it together and created a dirt bike trail park out of it. And these are entrepreneurs, but this is the essence, though, of understanding the difference between freedom and socialism, and that's really what's at stake. It's not just policy on this and policy on that. It is more fundamental, and I've said all throughout this, you can actually be a normal human being and have more than one concern. I can be concerned about coronavirus and my health and the health of my wife, who's a diabetic, and people in my family. I can be concerned about that and yet still be concerned about the economy not shutting down and crippling, particularly a lot of our small business people. And most importantly, I can be concerned about the government not encroaching on my civil liberties. I can be human and have those three things despite what the media tells me. I understand I can care about all those things at once.
So I got to tell you a great story. We had an event just recently with Paula White in Nevada. It was for our Evangelicals for Trump. And, you know, they've literally closed down the churches, limited the amount of people who could go into the church, but you could go to the casino. So guess where they had the church service? In the casino. Just how absurd are these policies that these Democrats are pushing forward?
Well, I think the other day, one of my favorite videos, some of you might have saw it, was the church that met at Walmart, that sang and did their things right in the middle of Walmart because that was open. But you're right. I hope people start to have their eyes open. You think in Michigan, where their governor's like the extreme, it's part of the reason why she was even considered to be vice president. Is
Who,
because,
the Wicked Witch of the West?
Yeah, she is just that extreme. Because remember, Joe Biden has outsourced really his entire agenda to the radical element of his party. But Michigan was a prime example of this, where for a while they would close down almost every business, but you could go to a grocery store or a place like a Walmart, but you could only go in the aisles where there were food and so-called essential. You couldn't go the aisle over, where they literally taped it off per the state law or state order from the governor, where they had seeds so you could grow your own food. That's just how ridiculous all this is. And again, I think, sadly, what we've seen is common sense has been suspended. And I hope most Americans, whether it's at the local level, the state level, or with people like Joe Biden and others, have realized these people don't believe that we're smart enough to run our lives. They believe the government should do that for them. We can never let that happen. We don't want to be like the old Soviet Union, and we don't want to be like Venezuela today.
Amen. And I just want to share with you a story from my family. So my dad grew up in Cuba, really worked hard to be an entrepreneur. And when Fidel Castro came in power, they took away his businesses. So he really had to make a decision between sitting back and just letting the government take control or standing up and fighting. And he did fight, and he ended up in jail for 6 years as a political prisoner. And the lessons he taught me as a child was, we live in the greatest country in the world. He came to America, became a carpenter, and then an accountant, raised his 3 kids, and lived the great American story. And so I know my calling has been to protect freedom, to protect this great republic, this great democracy. How fragile are we right now as a nation?
Well, Ronald Reagan had it right in so many levels, but one thing in particular he said years ago, that freedom is just one generation away from extinction. It doesn't get passed on through the bloodstream. It's something you have to stand up and fight for and defend and then pass on to the next generation to do the same thing. And that's really where we're at. Joe Biden, it's interesting. Joe Biden is unconventional in many ways, in part because he seems to be running his campaign in his basement. I joked actually the week of...
And Harris threw away the key. Just remember that. We can't find the key. Joe's stuck.
Whoops.
That's why he can't come to Wisconsin for the convention.
Well, that's right. I joked after Super Tuesday. I was doing a segment out in New York with Fox, and I said, well, if I was the DNC, I would put him in the basement and not have him come out till the day before the election. I did not. I was joking.
They took your advice,
right,
by the way.
They did it.
They really did.
But this is a guy who moved to the middle, so-called, the moderate view in the primary. Normally, any party, people move more towards the base in the primary, and in the general election, they come to the middle to show how they might govern. Joe Biden's completely mixed up. He ran to the middle only because, not because he's a moderate, but because there was no other place for him to win. All the radicals were fighting over the far, 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 far left of the party. He runs... for the time being to the middle, wins, and then basically literally gives his agenda to Bernie, to AOC, and now to Harris. You know, the media, I couldn't believe the other day when the New York Times called her a practical moderate.
Pragmatic, yes.
Pragmatic,
yes,
excuse
yes.
me.
The New York Times, fake news.
Well, and Newsweek was not exactly, Fox News. Newsweek did a report that showed that same day that her voting record is to the left of Bernie Sanders. She is to the left of an avowed, admitted socialist. This should tell you how crazy things are. But Joe Biden, who's run multiple times now for president, doesn't really care. In fact, we saw in '87, he'll make things up if he needs to. But he's basically said, I'll do whatever you want, just let me be the president. So he's given his entire agenda to the radical left. And we know what will happen. They'll ruin the economy. They'll raise every one of your taxes. Every one of you will see your tax. Every hardworking taxpayer will see their taxes go up. And yet not a one of them has condemned what's happening down in Chicago, in Portland, in Washington State, and Seattle. This is the kind of America we would have if we elect this ticket, which is precisely why we've got to make sure that Donald Trump and Mike Pence have 4 more years, and Wisconsin's going to be the key to making that happen.
Okay, Governor, let's put your political hat on. What's going to happen here in Wisconsin?
It's going to be extremely close. So the polls out there show Marquette poll, which is probably amongst the public polls the most reliable, if you believe public polls. We've always seen my races. It was always skewed because Republicans are less likely to respond, Republican-leaning voters less likely to respond than Democrats. The latest poll has a 5-point margin. Many in the media forget that that's about where we were 4 years ago. In fact, Hillary Clinton in the Marquette poll was ahead by 6 points on November 2nd, 2016. So I'm not saying don't believe the polls. I'm just saying they're skewed, even if they attempt to do them fairly. I think that's even more true with Donald Trump, and I think it's even more true now, because I've heard, maybe some of you here might actually tell me the same thing, I've heard people say, I'm not going to respond to a poll because I'm afraid it might be some of these radical protest rioters who are going to try and track me down at my home. So I think they're extremely skewed. Having said that, I think the polls 4 years might have been close to accurate, but what happened was people like us woke up. And we said, we got to do something. It's not enough just to talk to the people who are here. It's not enough to just talk at Republican events. We need a 2012, not a 2018 turnout. What I mean by that was I wanted to recall first in American history, just because all of you and others across the country, thank you, you didn't just turn out, and you didn't just get your political friends. We went out and talked to people at work, at worship, in the neighborhood, in the grocery store, at the Quick Trip, wherever it might be. We talked to people about why that race was important. In 2018, here and across America, I think a lot of us took it for granted. We said things are going pretty well. We had the best economy we'd ever had in Wisconsin, more people working than ever before. And I heard a lot of people say there's no way any Republican can lose. Well, when the left turns people out in Madison and they turn them out in the east side of Milwaukee in record numbers, the only way to compensate for that is us to go out and reach out to even more people, not just those who share our beliefs, but who share our political beliefs, but those who share our core beliefs about the individual and belief in the American dream. We need to share that now more than ever. I might be preaching to the choir. My dad was a preacher. He used to say, you preach to the choir because you want the choir to sing. So get out there and sing.
We got to get the choir to sing and vote, that's for sure. But do you ever encounter those individuals who come up to you quietly and say, I'm going to vote for Trump? We call them the Trump whisperers. Do you have those encounters?
Well, I used to have that when I'd go to schools in the middle of the protest. I'd get teachers who would actually go an extra step. They'd turn and look, and then they'd whisper, I think you're doing the right thing, because they'd get all sorts of abuse from their colleagues. And I think exactly the same thing's true with the president. And remember, and here's a bit of advice if you got friends, family, coworkers, neighbors who are on the bubble, who maybe occasionally say they don't like something the president tweeted or commented. I said, Washington, D.C., and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are 2 examples of this. Washington, D.C. is filled with people who like to say they know how to speak, that they say all the right things, at least to the media, but they don't do squat. They don't do squat for the everyday American out there. Donald Trump may not always talk or tweet the way I would or you would here in Wisconsin across the country, but he gets the job done. If I got to pick between a talker and a doer, I'm going to pick a doer every single time.
So, Governor, share with us, you've met with the president multiple times. Tell us a story.
Actually, I'll tell you a great one that we're in the shadow almost of Lambeau Field. So about this time, September 2016, I'd been with the president quite a bit, gearing up after he became the nominee, spoke for him at the convention. He's up just over in Eau Claire. We're at the University of Wisconsin in Eau Claire. We're having a big rally. We're backstage. Reince Priebus is with us. Jared came along with, I think Sean Duffy was with us at the time. And we're back waiting for the crowd to fill in. And the president's chit-chatting and then candidate, and he says, He goes, how are your Packers going to do? And I said, remember back then 4 years ago, Aaron, who I love, but who should, by the way, never play for the Chicago Bears ever. I don't care what we have to do. He's going to retire as a Green Bay Packer. But Aaron back then, remember, was on this weird no dairy diet. In fact, he actually said publicly he wasn't going to eat any cheese. And I said, so I'm grumbling to the candidate Trump. I'm saying, you know, I don't get this. Makes no sense. Aaron's normally pretty smart. And so we go on, we have the rally. That's September. January, I'm over here at Lambeau. That January, before he's sworn in as president, I'm there for the New York Giants game. We played them in the playoffs. Aaron threw one of those Hail Marys. It was a great game. So afterwards, I come downstairs. I'm going to get in the truck with the troopers. I look on my phone, and the president-elect had called. So I call him right back. I'm like, hey, Mr. President-elect, sorry I missed you. I was at a Packers playoff game. This is January. Remember, I talked about since September. He says to me, oh, I saw the game. Your boy, meaning Rodgers, your boy he did pretty well. He must be eating cheese again. I mean, for all the stuff the media knocks him on, the bottom line is this is a guy, and Mike Pence and I have been friends for years, was just with him the other day. I said the best way I describe the president is he's attentive. He's attentive. He really pays attention to things that nobody in the media gives him credit for. But he pays not just the fun things like that, but when people tell him about their worries. You know, Ron Johnson had a great bill called the Right to Try bill that said we're going to push back all the FDA requirements if someone's terminally ill. I remember a couple years ago, the president, after he signed it, months after, was talking at an event, and he didn't just talk about signing this bill. He got it. Because he talked to the families. He said, when you're terminally ill, you've got no hope. You want to try anything. You want to stay on this earth not for yourself, but for your loved ones. The president said that. You know, the guy that the media thinks has no empathy, he totally has empathy. They just hide it. He's just strong. But the guy, when you see him one-on-one, as you have, Mercy, you've seen him, he is incredibly empathetic because he's attentive to the needs of the American people. And he realizes Washington is not the place that's going to get it done. We need leaders like him and Mike Pence to push through all that, not to be talkers, but to be doers.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to do a quick rapid fire with the governor. And, you know, I think we understand that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, it's so hard to say her name. I have to practice it like 10 times. It's Kamala Harris. I don't think even Joe Biden said it right. No, he said it wrong. What this means when we're talking about socialism. I mean, this whole conference is about America versus socialism. So I'm going to throw a topic at you, and then you tell me what it would mean in a socialist country, what the impact would be. So on cultural and social issues.
I think in those areas you see conformity. There's that's the word I'd say, conformity. There's a massive push. We saw it in the old Soviet Union. I've got friends who came out of those old parts of the Soviet Republic who talked about the massive push to conform, and that just squeezes the individual right out.
National security and our place in the world.
I think when it comes to socialism, again, that's just bowing to the rest of the world. It's taken a knee for all the wrong reasons. We saw it start under Barack Obama. It would only continue if Joe Biden took us down that path.
Economic strength and individual prosperity.
Well, the reason we've been such a successful republic is because, again, we believe in the individual, and part of that means property rights. And when you have socialism, that takes that incentive away.
So final thoughts. What do you want to leave with this wonderful crowd that we have here in Green Bay?
Well, don't just sit here today and get inspired. Go out and inspire others.
Yes.
And remind them, again, this race is not about red or blue. It's not about Republican or Democrat. It's not even about liberal or conservative. It's really about the future of this country, the future of our families and future generations, and whether or not our kids and our kids' kids are going to live in a society based on freedom or one based on socialism where the government dictates those terms. I, for one, am going to do everything I can, encourage you to do the same, to make sure those future generations and those yet to be born live in a free society. God bless you.
Amen. You all are so blessed to have such a great leader in Governor Scott Walker. Thank you so much.